Hi, I'm Jim and this is Jim's Fix-It Shop, and we're going to work on Mark's snapper. He sent this in a while ago. I've been rebuilding a lot of it. I haven't done videos on it. It's repetitive stuff. I completely rebuilt the front end on it. All the bushings were shot. I still have to put new bearings in the tires. And now we're putting a new engine on it because I can't get parts for this old one. And I gotta pull off the drive disc. Now a lot of people have problems with this. And the biggest issue is getting them set screws broke loose so you can get it either adjusted or get it off. And your biggest problem is this. They're just too springy. If the engine is on the machine, you can't really get it in there the way these are meant to be used, like this. This goes in the set screw. If you use it this way, and you put a pair of pliers on here to try and break this loose, this is twisting and you're losing all of your torque in the shaft of the Allen wrench, especially if you're trying to use T-handles. The best thing you can use are these. They're short. They're not gonna twist. This particular one I've got one around here somewhere. What do I do with it? This one is 3/16 to get these off. I don't know where I put the coupler that we're trying to pull off of here. I changed things around on my shelf. Now this is the coupler that's on the crank. And both of these set screws are over top each other. This one has one pushing on the key and it has one over here pushing on the side of the crank. You're gonna find there's probably a lot of different ones. You know how easy that breaks loose? This has never been off. We're just gonna take them little buggers right out of there. I always like, Snapper never does this. But when I'm working on machines at the shop, I always take the set screws all the way out, because Brown and Sharp machines have a little trick they do to lock the set screws in place. They put one in and lock it down. They put another one in on top of it. So if you just loosen up the first ones, it's not coming apart. Now this I made. You used to be able to buy these, but they quit making all these pullers and stuff for these things years and years ago. Now, this is the hub that's on the crank. These two flats on here is what drives the pulley. The pulley slides over these two flats. Your drive disc screws onto these threads. So in order to use this puller that I made, you have to screw it into the drive disc. And I don't like to run this screw down on the crank and mess up them internal threads in the crank. So I drop that bearing in there. Now a standard Allen wrench will probably work just fine on here. Ooh, this one's coming off nice. I'm surprised. I could use a little bit longer bolt, I guess. I didn't know that this one must be a little longer. It wants to come off. That I'll have to use on the new engine. I did get some new engine. It's a 17.5 horse. This is a 12.5, and I just can't find one that you can afford. I called my Ace Hardware. They are what I usually get all my engine parts for, but the only thing he could find that's closely to this is a 17.5 horse, and his price was $1,295. I got these for $750 from the place I order my engines from. And you have to be a dealer to buy from them. I have a lot of people that try to get a hold of me and say, hey, we want to buy one of them. Well, you can't. I'm sorry. I need that key. For pulling keys out of wherever they are on a snapper, I always use these. They work perfect for pulling keys out. You grab onto it and you just twist down. Pops them right out. I don't think the new engine's going to come with a key, so we got to hang on to that. Now, whenever you switch, especially switching engine brands or engine sizes, you want to check to make sure that the crankshaft is in the same location on the bolt pattern, or your machine is not going to run right once you get the engine on and get it all hooked up. And the way I check that, I'm going to have to find me a screwdriver I see. I can't even get this bolt out of here. I don't know how they got it in. These bolts and these snappers are supposed to be placed in from underneath, sticking up. You put the nuts on the top. They had that one in there backwards for some reason. And I have to find an old-fashioned pencil for the next step. And I guess I'm going to have to hunt around and find one, because that's an important step. So hang on, I'll be right back. Okay, I finally found a pencil. It's hard to find a good old-fashioned pencil. You have to have one of these. Next, you want to get a piece of plywood or whatever you have laying around. This is MDF. You want to drill a 1-inch hole in the center of it and stick it on the bottom of the engine. Now you want to square it up with the engine so one side is where the carburetor is, and you want to mark that side so when you take it off you don't get mixed up. Now the important thing to do with this pencil is you have to make it really short. So you want to find the tightest spot and cut the pencil off. Best way I found to do it is a utility knife. Set the knife on it and rotate the pencil. Some of these pencils are not wood anymore, they're plastic. And it's a little harder to cut them. Now if you got a small hand, you don't have fat fingers like I do, you can stick your hand in there, but I usually use a pair of needle nose. I want to go up through the holes and mark them to get their location. And I also want this thing to be on here square with the engine. And I'm going to mark these holes. Best I can. Sorry you couldn't see that one. Now see how good we did. Not bad. Now we just have to drill a hole there. So I'm going to slip behind you to the drill press and drill this out. Okay, now we got to throw this thing on the floor. I don't know why they had to make these so heavy. Maybe I'm just getting old, I don't know. Oh. I got a pan on the floor for that engine to sit in. And I just bought these the other day at Menards. Nice pan, they're for cookies. And they're a good size and they were like $6. Nice heavy metal pan. When I tear engines or chain cases or differentials apart, I try to do it in a pan like that so I don't get the lubricant or the grease all over everything. Now we want to take our board and check it to our engine. Which is still in the box. And I think, wherever they are, I want to put these grippy gloves on because I sure don't want this to slip out of my hands. Okay, let's see if everything lines up, shall we? Got me a new flashlight I found on Amazon. You talk about bright. Magnetic base, everything lines up. Now we got to get the bolts in here. Move you over here so you can see again. I got some engine bolts. And they have different lengths. I don't know why. Oh. And when you take all the bolts out for the engine, your belt guard, or this is what keeps a belt from falling off the bottom of your engine. And if you look close, one side is longer than the other. This long side goes on the right hand side of your machine. If you put this on backwards, you will burn your belt up. So make sure the long side goes on the right. Now there's keepers you need. They call them bolt retainers. And they look like a washer. But if it'll focus in on that, I don't know how I can hold it, they have teeth sticking up. So once you shove these down, they're not going to come off. And they have tremendous holding power. You typically have to cut them off to get them off. And to the point where when you're going to set the engine on here and you miss and the engine hits on the top of the bolts, it will not push the bolts down. They really hold nicely. The hardest part is shoving them down. I guess you can almost screw them down for a ways, but these bolts aren't threaded all the way up, so you can't push them completely down. Want to make sure they're not too long. So what we need I think the socket I need is right here. Now sometimes you even have to put a board or something under here to hold the bolt so you can shove these things down on it. Or a pair of pliers maybe. It's not quite tight, so we're going to tap it down a little. I mean, you can barely wiggle that once you get them on. They really work nice. Now you have several bolt patterns in here, so when you push them down, you want to make sure you got the right hole. That's like I said, these don't come off. Now, and they stick together really easy. You got two of them here, you're going to have an awful time pushing them down on there. Okay. Now we're going to drop this thing down on the floor because I don't want to lift that engine any higher than I have to. I gotta say, that's the best thing I think I've ever bought. What do I do with my gloves? I suppose I could get the drive disc on there a little bit. Yeah, let's throw another 5 pounds on there. What the heck? It's already, these things came shipped in at 80 pounds a piece. We're gonna have to belt sand this a little bit. Doesn't want to fit. This is the, let me wiggle you a little bit. This is the belt sander I built. It came out very nice. It's a right and a left hand. Coarse and fine belt. Now we'll spin you back around and make you seasick. Let's see if we can get this key in here now. Oh, much better. Slides right in. And we'll tighten this up just to hold it in place. Now the fun part. Getting this bad boy on here. I usually grab onto the head and the bottom of the block itself, so I don't grab onto something weak and break it. Ah. Well, we got 2 out of 4 on there. You almost need 2 people for that, but it's on. Now, I'm not going to completely bore you to death on bolting this thing down, but when it comes to wiring it, I am going to do a complete video on that because this one has a solenoid on the bottom of the carburetor. And none of your old engines did. Now you can hook that solenoid to the charging system itself on the machine. And here's the two wires sticking out for the charger. One of them is just a plain wire. Let me show you. Here's a stator here off of Briggs that there's nothing wrong with. There's two wires coming off these stators on the newer ones. The older ones just had one. But one of these wires are AC and one is DC. And you can tell the difference between them by one of these wires is going to have a bump in it right there. The other one does not. That's a diode. That is like a water valve for electricity. It will let the current flow through it in one direction. If you didn't have that, or if it burns out on you, your current from your battery is going to back up and go into the stator and drain your battery dead all the time. So that's the one you want to hook your valve on the bottom of your carburetor. You want to hook it between the diode and the stator. If you hook it on this side of the diode, your battery is going to keep that solenoid open all the time, and it's not going to do its job. Plus, it's going to drain your battery dead. Now, if you have the newer style key switch, or if you feel like changing your key switch, there is a setting on your switch for that purpose. And I think I've already done a video on that. Oops. So we're going to get this bolted down, get the ground wires hooked up because they go under one of the bolts for the engine. This machine did not have any safety switches on it. The owner took them off because most of them shorted out, and the little brain that's in there, that's like $50, your modem, that shorted out. So you just unhooked everything. Well, I hate to send a machine out without some type of safety switch. I had a good examples. I had a friend of mine that lives over around the corner, and I still take care of his widow. I take care of her machines and her snowblower. He was out mowing his yard. Now, he did have a machine, when you lift your pedals, your feet up, the mower deck stops, because that's a mechanical device, not electrical. And he didn't know he had a health problem. He smokes, or did smoke. And he was mowing his side yard right next to the road, a busy road. And he was turning, and he passed out and fell off the machine. Well, when he fell off, the mower deck stopped, but the machine continued to go in a big circle around him until somebody noticed and stopped and shut the thing off and went and got his wife for help. So I designed and put my own switch on here. I tied a seat switch and a old style switch in the, well, now the engine's sitting on here, I gotta use the clutch. Must be the drive disc is down too far. But I installed a switch right here. And if you shift it in neutral, it pushes that switch in and breaks the circle or the contact I have wired up. And you can get off the machine without it killing the engine. But if you have it in gear and try to get off, the engine will die. So at least I have some type of safety system on here for him. If he doesn't like that, once he gets it home, he can cut the wire and that'll be the end of it. So we'll get this hooked up and we'll be back probably tomorrow. Okay, we're back on the wiring on this thing. That's what we're up to. And there is 3 main ignition switches on snappers. One is a single connector. That's if you have a pull start engine only. Then when you turn the key, it grounds out the magneto shorting block, which kills the coil and the engine quits. The next one is a 3 conductor switch. That's what was in here. It has one wire coming from the battery, and then when you turn the switch to start, the S sends power back to the solenoid that starts the engine, and when you shut the key off, the M kills the engine. Then you have, that's what was in here, but we need one more contact on the switch because of the solenoid on the carburetor. Now we have to go to a 5 conductor switch. Now, one of these conductors on all these switches, except for the first one, has a ground lug on it, but it's also grounded externally with the case. So it'll ground by just being mounted in the frame. Now, on some tractors, they're mounted in a plastic dashboard. So you have to have the ground hooked up somewhere on the machine. So this is the one that we just put on. I used the original wires and I just added one to it. That's going to send power back as soon as I turn the key to on to fire up the solenoid on the carburetor. And all the rest of them do the same thing. The one we're going to use for the carburetor is the one that's marked L for a light. Most tractors have headlights, so as soon as you turn the key on, the headlight comes on. But you have the battery, you have the starter, you have the magneto. They're all the same as the other switch with the addition of the headlight. So I've got that in. I took the original wires out. I added a wire and I just taped it to the outside of the tubing because the tubing was too small to get another wire through. So what we're going to do first on this side of the machine, so I don't keep moving you back and forth and making you sick, we're going to hook up the wires on this side of the machine. Now this has to go over on that side. That's where the magneto or the solenoid for the carburetor is. The blue one is power coming back from the key switch. That has to plug into the starting solenoid. We'll stick that over there someplace. The red is the that goes over there. Now the black wire, that hooks to your magneto shorting block. I think before I do that, I'm going to hook up this throttle cable. Now you got to really bend this thing to get that hook in that plastic box. This thing has got they got a little plug in there. I've never seen that before, that keeps the throttle in the low position. I don't know. So you really got to twist this wire around to get it in that plastic box. And whatever you do, don't break that block, because you can't buy them. You have to buy the whole control panel. Now there's a clamp here to hold this cable. And I'll explain to you how to adjust that as soon as I get this close. So we got the cable hooked to the little white block that accelerates the engine. Now what you want to do up here is you want to push this thing all the way up to choke. Throttle it all the way open in the choke. Then back here, I don't know how much you're going to be able to see. You got the clamp that holds the cable. So now you want to pull this entire assembly, including the outside of the cable, until this little arm chokes the engine. Now you want to tighten this up without letting anything move. Yeah, we can try that. Looks good to me. Okay, now we got one wire we have to put on a magneto shorting block. That's coming from the key switch. The other wire we need to put on there is this wire coming from the coil, so it will short it out and quit running. We had to add a piece of wire to it because it wasn't long enough. We're going to pull that up underneath here, around the engine, and we're going to hook it to the block. And then I have my safety. I rigged up a safety on this, so if he falls off or gets off and it's in gear, it'll kill the engine. We'll put that on there. Typically, snappers have 3 wires hooked to that magneto shorting block. Now we got to tighten up this nut. Now when you tighten this nut up, you want to hold the nut on the back side, because this is mounted in a pretty flimsy piece of plastic, and if you tighten it without holding the nut on the back, you will break that piece of plastic, and then your machine's not going to run at all. Sometimes the plastic will just get brittle from age or from heat from the engine, and it will break and it'll short out and it'll kill the engine. So if you're having trouble with the engine not starting at all, take this off and make sure it's not touching. If it does break on you, you don't really need it. What you can do is take all 3 of them wires and screw a wire nut on them, and it'll serve the same purpose. Now, let's go back here And we'll hook up the wire for the starter. It's not a 3/8. I mean, I need 2 wrenches for that. This is a 7/16 wrench. And again, especially on the starter, you want to use 2 wrenches. You want to hold that original nut so you don't twist that whole stud and mess up your engine. So we'll put this on here. It's kind of awkward with this pipe in the way, but he had that on his old engine so he could change the oil without that dripping down all over the frame. I can't get that in there. I wonder if a 7/16 tappet wrench will fit in there. Boy, barely. Hope I can get it out after I tighten the nut. No, it doesn't want to tighten up with that wrench in there. Now, I had to replace this wire. This is a wire that hooks to your magneto, your stator, that charges your battery. I can't use this handy dandy little plug they put on here for me because I don't have anything to plug into that. So we're just going to cut it off somewhere in there. I want to keep the wire as long as possible. Didn't quite get the whole connector. There we go. Yeah, we want to strip that off. Now this is a bigger diameter wire because of it's a multi-strand wire. This is a single strand wire, solid piece of copper, so it's a smaller diameter. So what we're going to do, we're going to strip that back a little longer. And I want to fold that over to make it a little bigger. So it'll fit a little better in this connector. Now I don't want to go in there. It's a little bit too big. We're in there now. Now we'll crush that down. And we'll stick this end in there. there's our charging wire. This wire, this is where this had 2 wires into it, this connector. Again, this is a replacement engine for a different machine. So I cut off the black one. I don't know if you can see that sticking up there or not. And that's the one I ran around here and added a piece of wire to. That goes up inside the engine. That kills it. This one goes around to the other side. I'll pull this through here. This goes to the starting or the solenoid on the carburetor. So this we have to hook into this wire we ran from the front. Well, wire's a mile long, that's for sure. And I gotta grab another connector. I thought I had one laying right here. Okay. Now I certainly don't want all this wire. So we're gonna cut this one off. We can pull this plug right out of here. It'll make life a whole lot simpler. We're gonna cut this off right here and strip it back. And let's see. That'll fit in there okay. And then we're gonna cut this one back here someplace. That'll be a little tougher to strip. All you need is about 1/4 of an inch of the wire stripped off. Now we'll plug it back in. Now the black, I guess it's a little dark over here. This is a blue wire. This wire goes through this hole in the back of this housing, and it plugs into the starting solenoid. Now this particular starting solenoid only has one lug on it because it has to be bolted to something steel that gives it the ground that it needs. This red wire goes through that same hole into this compartment with all the rest of the wires, and that plugs into this wire with a fuse in it. It's a little, I don't know if you can see it, it's a little black rubber thing that pops apart, and there's a fuse in there. Okay, we'll plug that in there. And that's pretty much it for the wiring. Now, I guess we could throw the battery in it and see if everything works. Let me grab it. I'll carry it around to this side. Henna, come and get you. Close your eyes. Now, whenever you hook up a battery in anything, a car, motorcycle, lawnmower, any battery on an engine, you want to hook up the hot wire first, because then if your wrench slips and you hit the frame, it will not spark because the ground isn't hooked up. When you're hooking it up, you hook up the hot first, then the ground. When you take the battery out, you unhook the ground first. It won't hurt if your wrench hits the frame when you're taking the ground wire off. Now, if I can get this up in here, these wires are kind of short. And getting that in there, you're gonna bump that hot contact. So that's why you don't want to hook up well, this is really a nightmare. When I make cables, I make them longer than this. Maybe I can set it down here, I don't know. Nope, not really. This is a handful. That screw could be a lot longer too. Yeah, I don't know what size nut he's got on here. 7/16. That little rubber thing on there. Put that up in here. Where'd my ground wire go? What are we hitting? Wow. We're hitting something in here. Don't feel right. Yeah. You got that wire through that hole and it can't go through there. That's where it should be on most of them. But it don't work on this one. Another 7/16. I don't know if you can hear it, but as soon as I turn the key on, the solenoid on the carburetor is clicking. If you can't hear it, if you hang on to it, you can feel it clicking. Now, shall we see if this thing starts? I don't want it to start right up right now, because I want to crank it over and fill the oil filter with oil so I can make sure that I've got enough in this thing. It's about in the middle of the two bumps. So let's see, we'll crank it over a little bit. I have to put it in neutral because of the safety switch I installed. Well, that should have got some oil in the filter. Now let's see what the dipstick says. You know, when you check oil on these small engines, I've only came across one machine in all the machines that I've ever used or worked on that said on the dipstick, do not put in and screw all the way tight. They just want you to drop it in like that and check the oil. I have never seen an engine that said that. I can't remember what machine I was working on. That said that. Well, we're still in between the marks. So all I want to do is get it running, and I'll fill it up with oil when I'm done. This is part of my dust collector, but it works good to suck the fumes out, because the wife really hates it when I make the wood shop smell like a garage. What can I say? It runs. It lives. So that's how you do the wiring. It was kind of quick. It was hard to see, I know. See, if you have any questions, send me an email and I'll try to answer them. I've just got a couple things to finish up. I got to take this off, turn it around, put it back on, stand it up, and I have to get the drive disc on the crank in the proper place so that the thing will run. That'll take me a while. So I'm pretty sure that just adjusting the drive disc is no big issue. I shouldn't need to record that. But if you have any questions, feel free to send me an email, and work safe, have fun, and I'll talk to you soon. When I get this driving out of here, I'll show you another video. And Mark will probably be over to pick it up. I'm in Michigan, in Muskegon. He's on the other side of the state in Detroit. And I know he's chomping at the bit to get this thing so he can do his leaves. So, we'll talk to you soon. So long.